Hello there, dear friend. Before we begin this peaceful journey together, I want to know a little about you. How has your day been? Whether it's been filled with joy or challenges, busy moments or quiet pauses, you're exactly where you need to be right now. What time is it where you are in the world? Are you settling in for the night, taking a midday rest, or perhaps greeting the early morning hours? Wherever you are, from the bustling cities of New York to the quiet countryside of England, from the mountains of Colorado to the shores of Australia, you're welcome here in this sacred space. If this story brings you peace, I'd love for you to subscribe to Sacred Slumber, where we gather each week to find rest in timeless tales of faith, hope, and gentle grace. Now, let's begin. Take a deep breath with me. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw relax, and your heart settle into this moment. Whether morning light is streaming through your window, afternoon shadows are dancing on the walls, or midnight quiet surrounds you like a gentle blanket, let us walk together through a story of gentle strength and unseen grace. We're about to enter a time long ago during the days of the judges in ancient Israel. It was a time of chaos and uncertainty, when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But this is not a story of chaos. This is a story of peace, of quiet faithfulness, of love that chooses to remain when it would be easier to leave. This is the story of Ruth, a young woman whose loyalty would echo through generations and whose humble heart would become part of the greatest story ever told. So close your eyes if you wish, breathe slowly, and let us journey together to the ancient land of Moab, where our story begins beside still waters of the soul. In the rolling hills of Moab, where the morning mist clung to the barley fields like a gentle prayer, lived a young woman named Ruth. She had married into a Hebrew family who had come to Moab during a time of famine in their homeland of Bethlehem. Her husband's name was Mahlon, and his mother was Naomi, a woman whose very name meant pleasant, and whose heart had once been full of joy. But sorrow has a way of finding us, even in the most peaceful places. First, Naomi's husband Elimelech died, leaving her alone with her 2 sons in a foreign land. The boys had grown into men and married Moabite women, Ruth and her sister-in-law Orpah. For 10 years they lived together, and Ruth learned to love not just her husband, but his faith, his God, and especially his mother, who had welcomed her with open arms. Then tragedy struck again, swift and merciless. Both Mahlon and his brother Chilion died, leaving 3 widows to face an uncertain world alone. In those days, a woman without a husband or sons had little hope of survival. They were vulnerable, forgotten, with no one to provide for them or protect them. Naomi sat in her small house, looking at the 2 young women who had become like daughters to her. The silence was heavy with grief, but also with decision. She had heard news from Bethlehem that the famine there had ended, that the Lord had visited his people and given them bread. Her heart longed for home, for the familiar hills of Judah, for the place where she had known happiness before sorrow came calling. "My daughters," she said softly, her voice worn thin by weeping, "I must return to my people. But you are young. You have your whole lives ahead of you. Go back to your mothers' houses. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me." She kissed them both, and they wept together. How can you say goodbye to someone who has been your family, your comfort, your companion through the darkest days? Orpah, after much tears and embracing, finally agreed to return to her people and her gods. It was the practical choice, the safe choice, the choice that made sense to everyone around them. But Ruth clung to Naomi with a determination that surprised them all. When Naomi urged her again to follow her sister-in-law, Ruth spoke words that would echo through history, words that came from the deepest place in her heart. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." There was something in Ruth's voice that told Naomi this was not a decision made in the heat of emotion, but a choice carved in stone, written in the very fibre of her being. This young Moabite woman was choosing love over security, faithfulness over comfort, an unknown future over a predictable past. And so they began the long journey from Moab to Bethlehem, two women with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the strength of their love for each other. They walked through valleys where wildflowers nodded in the breeze, past streams that sang ancient songs, under skies that seemed to stretch endlessly toward hope. As they travelled, Ruth would gather berries and herbs along the way, always making sure Naomi had enough to eat. She would find the softest spot for them to rest each night, would share her cloak when the desert air grew cold. She had chosen this path, and she would walk it with grace and dignity, one step at a time. The journey took many days, and with each step toward Bethlehem, Ruth was walking further from everything she had ever known. She was leaving behind the gods of her childhood, the customs of her people, the language of her birth. She was choosing to become a stranger in a strange land, not because she had to, but because love had made the choice for her. When they finally crested the hill that overlooked Bethlehem, the city spread before them like a handful of pearls scattered on brown velvet. The sun was setting, painting the stone houses in shades of gold and amber. Smoke rose from evening fires, and the sound of children playing drifted up to them on the evening breeze. "Look," Naomi whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "There it is, home." But as they descended into the city, the women who had known Naomi in her happier days barely recognized her. "Is this Naomi?" they asked each other, seeing how sorrow had aged her, how loss had bent her shoulders and silvered her hair. "Do not call me Naomi," she told them, her voice steady but sad. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home empty." But Ruth, standing quietly beside her, knew that Naomi was not truly empty. She had brought with her the love of this young woman, who had chosen to forsake all for the sake of faithfulness. And though neither of them knew it yet, they had arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest, when the fields were golden and ready, when provision was about to unfold in ways they could never have imagined. The story was just beginning, and the God who notices every sparrow that falls, who counts every tear that is shed, who remembers every act of kindness, was already preparing the next chapter of their lives. The morning air in Bethlehem was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of ripening grain and the promise of a new day. Ruth woke early, as she always did, listening to the gentle rhythm of Naomi's breathing beside her. They had found a small place to stay, but their provisions were nearly gone, and Ruth knew that something had to be done. She'd heard about the law of gleaning, a beautiful provision that the God of Israel had made for the poor and the stranger. After the reapers went through the fields harvesting the grain, the needy could follow behind and gather what was left. It was honest work, humble work, but it was work that could keep them alive. "Let me go to the fields," Ruth said gently to Naomi, "and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favour." Naomi nodded, understanding the necessity but also the risk. Ruth was young and beautiful, and the fields could be dangerous places for a woman alone. But there was something in Ruth's quiet determination that spoke of inner strength, of a spirit that could not be easily broken. And so Ruth set out in the early morning light, joining the other gleaners who moved like shadows behind the harvest workers. She had wrapped her head modestly and carried a small basket, ready to spend the day bent over in the sun, gathering grain kernel by kernel. As it happened, she came to the field that belonged to Boaz, a man of great wealth and standing in Bethlehem. But more than that, though Ruth did not know it yet, Boaz was a relative of Naomi's late husband, a kinsman who had the right and responsibility to help family members in need. The phrase, "as it happened," seems simple enough, but sometimes the most profound movements of providence come disguised as coincidence. Ruth's feet carried her to that particular field not by accident, but by the gentle guidance of a God who was weaving a story larger than she could imagine. Boaz arrived at his field that morning, as was his custom, to greet his workers and oversee the harvest. He was a man in his middle years, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. When he saw his reapers, he called out, "The Lord be with you," and they responded, "The Lord bless you." It was more than a greeting. It was a glimpse into the heart of a man who knew that all good things come from above. But his attention was caught by a young woman he had never seen before, working quietly at the edge of his field. She moved with grace and dignity, even in the humbling work of gleaning. There was something about her that drew his eye, not just her beauty, but the way she carried herself with quiet strength. "Whose young woman is this?" he asked his foreman. "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab," the foreman replied. "She asked permission to glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers, and she has been working steadily from early morning until now with only a brief rest." Boaz watched her for a moment longer, seeing how she worked without complaining, how she was careful not to take more than was rightfully hers, how she paused to help an elderly gleaner who had dropped her grain. His heart was moved by her diligence and her kindness. He approached her quietly, not wanting to startle her. "Listen, my daughter," he said gently. "Do not go to glean in another field, and do not leave this one. Stay close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. I have charged the young men not to touch you, and when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Ruth was so surprised by his kindness that she fell on her face and bowed to the ground. "Why have I found favour in your sight," she asked, "that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz had already heard the story of her loyalty to Naomi, how she had left her own people to care for her mother-in-law. "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "How you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth's eyes filled with tears at his words. She had not expected such kindness from a stranger, such recognition of her small acts of faithfulness. "You have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant," she said softly, "though I am not one of your servants." As the day wore on, Boaz continued to watch over her. At mealtime, he invited her to eat with his workers, to dip her bread in the wine and share in the meal. He even made sure she had roasted grain to take home to Naomi. When she returned to her gleaning, he quietly instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her to find, to make her work easier and more fruitful. The sun was beginning to set when Ruth finally made her way home, her basket heavy with grain. She had gathered an ephah of barley, enough to feed herself and Naomi for many days. But more than that, she carried with her the memory of unexpected kindness, of a man who had seen beyond her status as a foreigner and a widow to recognize the faithfulness of her heart. When she showed Naomi all that she'd gathered, and told her about the kindness of Boaz, Naomi's eyes brightened for the first time in months. "Blessed be he by the Lord," she said, "whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. The man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." Ruth continued to glean in the fields of Boaz throughout the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, always welcomed, always protected, always provided for. She would come home each evening with grain, and with stories of the kindness she had experienced. And slowly, so slowly that neither of them noticed it happening, hope began to take root in their hearts once again. Little did they know that this was only the beginning of a story that would change not just their lives, but the course of history itself. For the God who sees every act of kindness, who remembers every sacrifice made in love, was already preparing the next chapter of their beautiful story. The harvest season was drawing to a close, and the grain had been gathered from the fields and brought to the threshing floor. It was a time of celebration and completion, when the hard work of the harvest gave way to the satisfaction of provision secured. The air was filled with the sound of winnowing, as the grain was separated from the chaff in the evening breeze. Naomi had been watching the growing affection between Ruth and Boaz with the wisdom of a woman who had lived long enough to recognize the hand of God in everyday circumstances. She had seen how Boaz's eyes followed Ruth, how he spoke to her with special gentleness, how he made sure she was always provided for and protected. And she had seen how Ruth, despite her natural reserve, had begun to smile more often, how she spoke Boaz's name with a special warmth. One evening, as they sat together in their small dwelling, Naomi took Ruth's hands in hers. "My daughter," she said softly, "should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." Ruth listened carefully as Naomi explained the custom of the kinsman redeemer, how a close relative had the right and responsibility to marry a widow to preserve the family line and inheritance. It was not just about marriage, but about redemption, about restoring what had been lost, about ensuring that the names of the dead were not forgotten. "Wash therefore and anoint yourself," Naomi continued, "and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." It was a bold plan, one that required great courage and faith. Ruth would be placing herself in a vulnerable position, trusting in the character of a man she had come to respect and admire. But she had learned to trust Naomi's wisdom, and more than that, she had learned to trust the God who had been guiding her steps from the very beginning. "All that you say I will do," Ruth replied simply. As the sun set and the first stars appeared in the clear night sky, Ruth prepared herself carefully. She bathed and anointed herself with fragrant oil, then put on her best garment. But this was not about seduction or manipulation. This was about approaching a good man with dignity and respect, trusting in his honour and in the customs that governed their society. The threshing floor was a place of hard work and celebration, where the grain was separated from the chaff and the harvest was completed. By the time Ruth arrived, the work was done, and the men had eaten and drunk and told stories under the stars. The atmosphere was one of contentment and satisfaction, of work well done and provision secured. Ruth waited in the shadows, watching as Boaz finished his meal and settled down to sleep beside the heap of grain. It was his responsibility to guard the grain through the night, to ensure that nothing was stolen or damaged. The night was warm and peaceful, filled with the sounds of crickets and the gentle rustle of the evening breeze. When all was quiet and Boaz was sleeping peacefully, Ruth approached with silent steps. Her heart was beating fast, but her movements were sure and deliberate. She gently uncovered his feet and lay down, then waited in the darkness for him to wake. It was midnight when Boaz stirred, suddenly aware of someone at his feet. He was startled but not afraid, turning carefully to see who was there. In the dim starlight he could make out the form of a woman, and he recognized her immediately. "Who are you?" he asked softly. "I am Ruth, your servant," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Spread your wing over your servant, for you are a redeemer." It was a beautiful way of asking for his protection and provision, using the imagery of a bird sheltering her young under her wing. She was asking him to fulfill the role of kinsman redeemer, to marry her and restore the inheritance of her late husband. Boaz was deeply moved by her words, by the trust she had placed in him, by the way she had approached him with such dignity and grace. "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter," he said warmly. "You have made this last kindness greater than the first in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich." He was older than Ruth, a man of substance and position, and he was amazed that she would choose him over the many young men who would have been eager to marry such a beautiful and virtuous woman. Her choice spoke of wisdom and character, of a heart that valued kindness and faithfulness over youth and passion. "And now, my daughter, do not fear," he continued. "I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I." There was another relative who had the first right of redemption, and Boaz was too honourable to proceed without giving that man the opportunity to fulfil his duty. "Remain tonight," he said gently, "and in the morning if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." Ruth lay down again at his feet, comforted by his words and his promise. She had taken a great risk in coming to him, but she had found in Boaz a man of integrity and honour, someone who would do what was right even when it was difficult. When the morning came, before anyone else was stirring, Boaz quietly measured out 6 measures of barley and helped Ruth arrange it in her cloak. "Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed," he said with a smile. Then he sent her on her way before anyone could see her and misunderstand her presence there. Ruth returned home with her heart full of hope and her arms full of grain. When Naomi saw her coming, she knew immediately that something significant had happened. "How did you fare, my daughter?" she asked eagerly. Ruth told her everything that had happened, every word that had been spoken, every kindness that had been shown. When she finished, Naomi smiled with satisfaction. "Wait, my daughter," she said, "until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest but will settle the matter today." And so they waited, 2 women who had learned that sometimes the greatest acts of faith happen in the quiet moments, when we trust in the goodness of others and in the providence of God. The next chapter of their story was about to unfold, and with it the fulfillment of promises they had hardly dared to hope for. The morning sun was just beginning to warm the stones of Bethlehem when Boaz made his way to the city gate. This was where the elders gathered, where business was conducted, where legal matters were settled according to the ancient customs of Israel. His heart was full of purpose as he took his seat and waited for the other Redeemer to pass by. He didn't have to wait long. Soon he saw the man approaching, and Boaz called out to him by name. "Come over, friend, and sit down here." The man, curious about what business Boaz might have with him, came and sat down. Then Boaz gathered 10 of the city elders to serve as witnesses, for what he was about to do would affect not just 2 people, but entire family lines and inheritances. "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab," Boaz began, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air, "is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." The other man considered this carefully. A piece of land was valuable, an investment that could bring profit and increase his holdings. "I will redeem it," he said confidently. But Boaz was not finished. "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Suddenly the proposition became more complicated. To marry Ruth would mean that any children born to them would be considered the heirs of her first husband, not his own. The land would eventually pass to them, not to his existing family line. What had seemed like a good business deal now became a sacrifice that would cost him more than he was willing to pay. "I cannot redeem it for myself," he said, backing away from the commitment, "lest I impair my own inheritance. You take my right of redemption, for I cannot redeem it." It was exactly what Boaz had hoped to hear. According to the custom of the time, the man removed his sandal and gave it to Boaz as a sign that he was transferring his right of redemption. The sandal was a symbol of walking in someone else's place, of taking on their responsibilities and privileges. Boaz accepted the sandal and turned to address the elders and all the people who had gathered to witness this transaction. "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day." The crowd erupted in celebration and blessing. "We are witnesses," they called out joyfully. "May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. It was a beautiful blessing, invoking the names of the great matriarchs of Israel and expressing the hope that Ruth would become equally honoured in the history of God's people, and how prophetic those words would prove to be. Meanwhile, Ruth and Naomi had been waiting at home, their hearts full of anticipation and hope. When the messenger came running to tell them what had happened at the gate, they could hardly believe their ears. The legal proceedings had gone exactly as they had hoped. Boaz had redeemed not just the land, but Ruth herself, and they were to be married. The wedding was a joyous occasion, celebrated by the entire community. Ruth, the young Moabite woman who had arrived in Bethlehem as a poor widow, was now the honoured wife of one of the most respected men in the city. But more than that, she had found in Boaz a man who valued her faithfulness, who cherished her loyalty, who would love and protect her for the rest of their days. As the seasons passed, Ruth and Boaz settled into a life of contentment and purpose. Boaz was a generous provider, and Ruth was a wise and gentle wife. Naomi, no longer bitter but filled with joy, lived with them and was cared for in her old age. The house that had once echoed with sorrow now rang with laughter and love. And then came the greatest blessing of all. Ruth conceived and bore a son, a healthy, beautiful child who would be raised in the love and fear of the Lord. The women of the neighbourhood came to congratulate Naomi, saying, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." They named the child Obed, which means servant or worshipper, and Naomi took him on her lap and became his nurse. The child brought healing to her broken heart, restoration to her empty life, and joy to her golden years. But the story doesn't end there. Little Obed grew up to become the father of Jesse, who became the father of David, the great king of Israel, and through David's line would come the Messiah, the Saviour of the world. Ruth, the foreign woman who had chosen loyalty over security, faith over fear, had become part of the most important family tree in all of human history. In the genealogy of Jesus Christ, recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, we find these words: Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. A Moabite woman's name is written forever in the lineage of the Son of God, a testament to the truth that God's grace knows no boundaries, that his love extends to all who seek refuge under his wings. Ruth's story teaches us that faithfulness in small things leads to blessing in great things, that loyalty and love are never wasted, that God can take our deepest sorrows and weave them into his greatest joys. She reminds us that sometimes the most profound acts of faith happen not in grand gestures, but in quiet decisions to remain faithful, to keep loving, to keep trusting, even when we cannot see the end of the story. As we come to the end of Ruth's story, let us pause beside these still waters and reflect on the gentle truths that flow through this ancient tale. Like a quiet stream that shapes the landscape over time, Ruth's life teaches us lessons that can transform our own journey of faith. Ruth's story shows us the profound power of remaining faithful, even in seasons of pain and uncertainty. When Naomi urged her to return to her people and her gods, Ruth could have chosen the easier path, the path that made sense to everyone around her. Instead, she chose love. She chose to remain loyal to a woman who had shown her kindness, to a faith that had captured her heart, to a God she was still learning to trust. Her famous words, "Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God," were not spoken in a moment of emotional impulse, but from a deep well of commitment that had been growing in her heart over years of walking with Naomi. In our own lives, we face moments when loyalty is tested, when it would be easier to walk away from relationships, commitments, or callings that have become difficult. Ruth's example reminds us that some of the most beautiful chapters of our lives are written in the ink of faithful love, even when that love costs us something precious. Have you ever chosen love when it would have been easier to walk away? Perhaps you stayed with a friend through a difficult season, remained committed to a calling when it became challenging, or continued to love someone even when they couldn't love you back in the same way. These quiet acts of loyalty are never wasted. They shape us into people of depth and character, and they often open doors to blessings we never could have imagined. One of the most beautiful aspects of Ruth's story is how rarely God's name is mentioned, yet his presence is evident in every chapter. The phrase, "as it happened," appears when Ruth comes to Boaz's field, but we understand that this was no accident. It was divine providence working through ordinary circumstances to bring about extraordinary results. God's guidance in Ruth's life came not through burning bushes or angelic visitations, but through the kindness of a stranger, the wisdom of a mother-in-law, and the legal proceedings at a city gate. He worked through the natural rhythms of harvest and gleaning, through cultural customs and family relationships, through the everyday decisions of people who were simply trying to do what was right. This reminds us that God's hand is often most visible in hindsight, in the moments when we look back and see how perfectly things came together, how doors opened at just the right time, how people entered our lives precisely when we needed them most. The God who numbers our days and knows our needs is constantly at work in the ordinary moments of our lives, weaving together circumstances and relationships for our good and his glory. Can you see moments in your own life where something just happened at the perfect time? Perhaps you met a lifelong friend in an unexpected place, discovered an opportunity through a chance conversation, or found help arriving just when you needed it most. These are not coincidences, but glimpses of a loving God who is intimately involved in the details of our lives. Ruth's story is ultimately about transformation, about how God can take our deepest losses and weave them into his greatest purposes. She began as a young widow in a foreign land, with no prospects and no security. She was an outsider, a foreigner, someone who by all human standards had little to offer the grand story of God's people. Yet her simple acts of faithfulness, her quiet loyalty, her willingness to work humbly in the fields, positioned her to become part of the royal lineage of David and ultimately of Jesus Christ. Her name is recorded forever in the genealogy of the Messiah, a testament to the truth that no one is too small, too foreign, or too broken to be used by God for his purposes. Ruth's transformation from widow to wife, from foreigner to family member, from poverty to provision, reminds us that our current circumstances do not define our future possibilities. The God who saw potential in a Moabite gleaner sees potential in each of us, regardless of our background, our mistakes, or our limitations. No matter where you come from, no matter what losses you have experienced, no matter how ordinary your life may seem, your story can become part of something bigger. Your faithfulness in small things, your acts of love and loyalty, your willingness to trust God even when you cannot see the whole picture. These are the threads that God uses to weave his magnificent tapestry of grace. Perhaps you are in a season of loss right now, wondering if your pain has any purpose, if your faithfulness matters, if your small acts of love make any difference. Ruth's story whispers hope into those questions. It reminds us that God wastes nothing, that he can bring beauty from ashes, that he specializes in writing stories of redemption and restoration. The title of Ruth's story, Beside Still Waters, comes from the 23rd Psalm, where David writes about the Good Shepherd, who leads his sheep beside still waters and restores their souls. Ruth's life exemplifies this truth. In the midst of chaos and uncertainty, she found peace in her commitment to love and faithfulness. In the midst of loss and grief, she discovered that God's provision was always enough for each day. Her story teaches us that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God in our problems. It is not found in perfect circumstances, but in perfect trust. Ruth faced real challenges, real losses, real fears, but she faced them with a spirit of quiet faith and humble obedience. The still waters of God's peace are available to us in every season of life. They flow not from our circumstances, but from our relationship with the one who is the source of all peace. When we, like Ruth, choose to trust in God's goodness, even when we cannot see his plan, when we choose to remain faithful even when the path is unclear, we find ourselves beside still waters where our souls can be restored. As you drift toward rest tonight, may you carry with you the gentle strength of Ruth's example. May you know that even in quiet places, even in fields of sorrow, even in long roads and sleepless nights, grace is never far away. The God who saw Ruth's faithfulness, who provided for her needs, who wove her story into his greater plan, is the same God who sees you tonight. Your acts of loyalty may seem small, but they matter. Your faithfulness in ordinary moments is building something beautiful. Your willingness to trust when you cannot see the whole picture is positioning you for blessings you cannot yet imagine. Rest now in the peace that comes from knowing you are held by a love that will never let you go, guided by a wisdom that sees the end from the beginning, and called into a story that is bigger and more beautiful than you can possibly imagine. May you sleep beside still waters, where your soul can be restored, your strength can be renewed, and your hope can be refreshed for whatever tomorrow may bring. The God who led Ruth from loss to legacy, from sorrow to joy, from emptiness to fullness is leading you too, and his plans for you are good. Sweet dreams, dear friend. May you wake tomorrow with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are deeply loved, perfectly guided, and part of a story that extends far beyond what you can see. Like Ruth, who could never have imagined that her simple decision to stay loyal to Naomi would lead to her becoming the great-grandmother of King David, you too are part of a tapestry being woven by hands far wiser than your own. Your faithfulness today, your love tomorrow, your trust in the unseen God who walks beside you, these are the threads that he is using to create something beautiful, something lasting, something that will echo through generations. Rest now in the shadow of his wings, knowing that you are safe, you are seen, and you are more precious than you know. The same God who led Ruth beside still waters is leading you too, and his love will never fail. Amen. In the quiet of this moment, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Perhaps you're already settled in bed, your head resting on your pillow, or maybe you're preparing for rest after a long day. Wherever you are, however you've arrived at this moment, know that you are welcomed here with tenderness and care. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the weight of your body surrendering to the support beneath you. Notice how your shoulders can soften, how your hands can rest without grasping, how your face can release any tension it's been holding. There's nothing you need to do right now except breathe and listen. Let's breathe together for a moment. Inhale slowly through your nose, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Hold it gently for just a moment, and then exhale through your mouth, releasing anything that doesn't serve your peace. Inhale comfort. Exhale worry. Inhale divine peace. Exhale human striving. Inhale rest. Exhale burden. With each breath, you're creating space within yourself. Space for stillness, space for quiet, space for the gentle voice that calls you by name. I invite you now to begin visualizing a journey. As you continue breathing slowly and deeply, imagine yourself walking along a narrow country path. It's late afternoon, and the golden light of the setting sun bathes everything in a warm glow. The air is perfect, not too warm, not too cool, and carries the sweet scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. The path winds gently through rolling hills. With each step you feel more of your daily concerns falling away. The emails waiting for responses, the conversations that left you wondering, the tasks still uncompleted, all of these can wait outside this peaceful moment. As you walk, you notice the sound of birdsong in the distance, not the busy chattering songs of morning birds, but the gentle settled sounds of evening, soft calls that seem to whisper, all is well, rest is coming. The path begins to crest a small hill, and as you reach the top you see before you a wide meadow. The grass sways gently in a soft breeze, creating waves of movement like a green sea. Scattered throughout are wildflowers in gentle hues, pale yellows, soft whites, and tender purples. At the far edge of this meadow, you can just make out the stone walls of an ancient sheepfold, a place of gathering, a place of safety, a place of rest. This is where our journey is taking us tonight, to the sheepfold of the Good Shepherd. As you descend the hill toward the meadow, you feel a sense of being both completely free and completely held. The vast open sky above reminds you of boundless possibility, while the path beneath your feet assures you that you're being guided. With each step, your breathing continues to deepen. Your inhales become fuller, your exhales become longer. Your mind begins to quiet like waters settling after a storm. The path now leads you into the meadow itself. The grass reaches up past your ankles, brushing against you with feather-like touches. You can feel the earth beneath your feet, solid, supportive, ancient. As you walk, you begin to notice the sounds of sheep in the distance, not loud or disturbing, but the gentle bleating that speaks of contentment and security. They're calling to one another as they make their way toward the sheepfold for the night. And then you hear something else, a voice. Low and warm, it carries across the meadow with remarkable clarity. It's not calling to you, not yet, but to the sheep. And you notice how they respond, turning their heads, adjusting their path, moving with purpose toward the voice. This is the voice of the shepherd, calling his sheep to evening rest. Each one knows this voice intimately. Each one trusts this voice implicitly. Each one follows this voice instinctively. As you continue your walk through the meadow, drawn toward the sheepfold just as the sheep are drawn, you begin to feel a sense of recognition stirring within you. Something about this voice awakens a deep memory, not from yesterday or last year, but from the very foundation of your being. It's as if your soul remembers this voice from before time began. The path begins to widen as you near the sheepfold. The stone walls become clearer now, smooth, weathered stones carefully placed one upon another by hands that understood the importance of creating sanctuary. These walls have stood through countless seasons, through rain and wind and snow and sun, remaining steadfast in their purpose, to protect, to shelter, to create a space of safety. As you draw nearer, you see the entrance to the sheepfold, a simple opening in the wall. There is no gate of wood or metal, for in this place, in this story, the shepherd himself serves as the gate. Nothing enters that is not first approved by him. Nothing threatens that is not first faced by him. The voice continues to call, naming each sheep individually, knowing each one's unique needs, tendencies, and nature. And as the sun begins to sink lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the meadow, you find yourself at the entrance to the sheepfold, ready to cross the threshold into deeper rest. As you stand at the entrance to the sheepfold, you pause to take in its simple beauty. The circular stone walls rise about 4 feet high, tall enough to keep the sheep secure, yet low enough that the shepherd can see over them to watch for any approach of danger. The stones themselves seem to hold stories, their surfaces marked by time and weather, yet their arrangement remains sturdy and true. The ground inside the sheepfold has been softened by the passage of countless sheep over many years. What might once have been rocky earth has become a cushioned, almost velvety surface, perfect for rest. In some areas, particularly along the inside edge of the wall, tufts of soft grass have grown, creating natural pillows for weary heads. You notice that while the day remains warm, there is a coolness gathered in the shadows of the walls, a reminder that night approaches and with it the deeper rest that darkness brings. The air here carries a different quality. Sheltered from the breeze that moves across the open meadow, it feels somehow more concentrated, more present. As you step inside, crossing the threshold where the shepherd stands watch, you feel a subtle shift in your awareness. The sounds of the wider world seem to soften. The concerns that normally occupy your thoughts recede further. Here, within these ancient walls, existence becomes simpler. There is no need to navigate complex decisions or manage difficult relationships. There is only the present moment, the approaching night, and the protective presence of the shepherd. You find a place to sit against the wall where the last rays of sunlight still warm the stones. From here, you can watch as the sheep continue to arrive, each responding to its name when called, each receiving a gentle touch from the shepherd as it passes by him into the fold. This is how it has been done for thousands of years in the hill country. This ancient rhythm of call and response, of leaving the wide pastures for the secure fold, of trusting the one who leads and protects. Nothing about this scene would look unfamiliar to someone from centuries past. The relationship between shepherd and sheep transcends time, speaking to something essential about care and trust. In ancient times, you remember hearing, shepherds would often combine their flocks during the day, allowing the sheep to graze together in larger numbers. But when evening came, each shepherd would call only to his own sheep, using distinctive sounds or words that only his flock recognized. Remarkably, the sheep would separate themselves, following only the voice they knew, never confused by the calls of other shepherds. As you observe this evening gathering, you notice the care with which the shepherd examines each sheep as it enters. His hands move gently over wool and skin, checking for injuries or thorns that might have been gathered during the day's wandering. For one sheep, he removes a small burr caught in the thick wool. For another, he applies a soothing balm to a minor scrape. No need goes unnoticed, no discomfort goes untended. The sheep themselves seem to welcome this attention. Though some are clearly tired from the day's grazing, they pause willingly for the shepherd's examination. There is trust in their stillness, contentment in their patience. They know these hands, they know this voice, they know they are cared for individually, specifically, attentively. As the fold fills with more sheep, you notice the distinctive sounds they make. Not the loud bleating of alarm, but the soft, low sounds of recognition and settlement. They are talking to each other and to the shepherd in their own language of belonging. The air begins to cool more noticeably as the sun touches the horizon. Long shadows stretch across the sheepfold, and the stone walls now provide not just security, but shelter from the light evening breeze. The shepherd moves among the gathered sheep, his presence clearly bringing them comfort. Some draw closer to him as he passes, seeking the reassurance of proximity. You watch as he kneels beside one sheep that seems particularly restless. He speaks softly to it, words you cannot quite hear from where you sit, but you can see the effect. The sheep's breathing slows, its movements still. Its eyes close in what can only be described as surrender to care. This, you realize, is what true safety looks like. Not the absence of all threat, but the presence of one who is trustworthy enough to allow complete vulnerability. The sheep do not need to remain vigilant because the shepherd stays watchful. They do not need to worry about provision because the shepherd knows where the sweet water flows and the tender grass grows. They do not need to fear the darkness because the shepherd's sight penetrates what they cannot see. As twilight deepens into early evening, a profound quiet descends upon the sheepfold. The activities of the day, the walking, the grazing, the occasional startle running, have given way to stillness. Energy spent has prepared the way for deep restoration. The shepherd now sits at the entrance to the fold, his back against one of the stone walls, his staff across his lap. From this position, he can see both outward across the meadow and inward to the gathered flock. Nothing approaches without his knowledge. Nothing disturbs without his permission. In this ancient pattern, in this timeless scene, you feel your own breathing continuing to slow, your own thoughts continuing to quiet. The simple rightness of this place seeps into your awareness. The stone walls that have sheltered generations, the soft earth that welcomes rest, the attentive presence that makes vulnerability safe. As night begins to embrace the world outside the fold, you feel yourself drawn deeper into the peace of this sanctuary. The voice of the shepherd, which first called across the meadow, now speaks in the silence of complete trust. And though no words are spoken aloud, you understand with perfect clarity. You are known. You are seen. You are safe. As the night deepens around the sheepfold, the stars begin to appear overhead. First one, then another, then suddenly a multitude, transforming the darkness into a vast canvas of light. The shepherd remains at his post, a silhouette of watchful presence against the night sky. In this moment of perfect stillness, words from ancient scripture rise in your mind, words that have brought comfort to countless souls through the centuries. The 10th chapter of John's Gospel, where Jesus describes himself as the Good Shepherd, speaks with particular resonance in this place of safety and rest. Listen now as the words flow gently into your consciousness. Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. Pause and consider this image of the gate. In ancient sheepfolds like this one, the shepherd would often position himself in the opening of the wall, literally becoming the gate. Nothing could enter without passing by him first. No predator could threaten, no thief could steal, no sheep could wander away without encountering the shepherd's watchful presence. Imagine now what it means to have such protection. Not a cold barrier of wood or metal, but a living, attentive guardian who knows each one by name. This is not distant security, but intimate care. This is not impersonal safety, but relationship-based protection. The words continue to unfold. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Reflect on the difference between hired protection and devoted care. The difference is not in skill or strength, but in relationship and commitment. The Good Shepherd's connection to the sheep is not a transaction but a bond. His protection flows not from duty but from love. As you gaze across the sheepfold, you can see this truth embodied in the shepherd's posture, alert but relaxed, vigilant but peaceful. His attention never wavers, yet it carries no tension. This is the watching that comes from love rather than obligation. The sacred text continues, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep." Imagine being known, fully known, and still loved without hesitation. Not the surface knowing of casual acquaintance, but the deep knowing that sees every fear, every hope, every quiet corner of your heart. The shepherd knows when you are afraid, when you are lonely, when you are in pain. He knows when you have wandered, when you have stumbled, when you have fallen, and still he calls your name with tenderness. This knowing is not one-directional. The sheep also know their shepherd. They recognize his voice among all others. They trust his guidance without question. They follow his leading with confidence because experience has taught them that he brings them to good places, to fresh water, to green pastures, to safe rest. As these words settle into your spirit, another passage emerges. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. There is a certainty in these words, a promise of security that transcends physical safety. The shepherd's care extends beyond the immediate dangers of wolves and thieves to the deeper threats of meaninglessness and separation. His protection covers not just the body but the soul. His provision satisfies not just physical hunger, but spiritual longing. As you reflect on these words, you notice the sheep in the fold have arranged themselves in a pattern that seems both random and intentional. Some cluster together for warmth, others maintain a small space of separation. Some lie with their heads toward the centre, others face the walls. Each has found the position that brings them comfort, yet all remain within the protective circle of the shepherd's care. Is this not a beautiful picture of community within security? Unity without uniformity? Each sheep is different, in size, in age, in temperament, yet all are equally valued, equally protected, equally known by name. The night has fully embraced the world now. The meadow beyond the sheepfold lies invisible in darkness, but here within the circle of stone walls there is no fear of what cannot be seen. The shepherd's presence transforms the night from a time of vulnerability to a season of rest. One more passage rises in your awareness. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. These words speak of expansion, of inclusion, of a circle of care that continues to widen. The shepherd's heart is not limited to those already gathered, but extends to those still wandering, still searching, still unsure of where they belong. As you let these ancient words settle deeply into your consciousness, you notice that the rhythm of your breathing is synchronized with the gentle rise and fall of the sleeping sheep around you. There is a harmony here, a natural community formed not by effortful connection, but by shared trust in the one who watches over all. The shepherd's eyes meet yours across the sheepfold, and in that glance you understand you too are invited into this circle of care. You too are known by name. You too are welcome to rest under the watchflies of the one who never slumbers. As the night grows deeper, something remarkable happens. The scene around you begins to shift, not in a jarring way, but with the gentle transformation of a dream unfolding. The walls of the sheepfold seem to dissolve, and you find yourself no longer sitting against the stones, but standing in an open field just as dawn begins to break on the horizon. The sheep are rising from their rest, stretching and shaking the night stillness from their bodies. The shepherd moves among them, speaking softly to each one, calling names that sound like music in the morning air. He turns to you now, his eyes finding yours with a gaze that feels at once ancient and immediate. With a small gesture of his hand, he invites you to join him as he prepares to lead the flock to fresh pastures. You rise and move toward him, feeling neither rushed nor hesitant. There is a rightness to this moment, as if it has been waiting for you through all the days of your life. "Come," he says, his voice both gentler and more compelling than you imagined. "Walk with me a while." As the sheep begin to follow the shepherd out into the wider fields, you find yourself walking alongside him. Not ahead, not behind, but beside, close enough to hear his breathing, to notice the deliberate placement of his feet on the earth, to feel the subtle movements of the air as he lifts his staff to guide the way. The morning unfolds around you in a symphony of sensory experiences. The earth beneath your feet feels solid yet yielding, supporting each step without resistance. The cool morning air carries the mingled scents of grass, wild flowers, and the earthy wool of the sheep. Light increases gradually as the sun climbs higher, illuminating the landscape in stages, first outlining the hills in gold, then filling the valleys with amber light, finally bathing everything in the clear radiance of full morning. You notice that the shepherd does not hurry. His pace is steady but unhurried, considerate of the youngest lambs and the oldest ewes. There is no sense of urgency, no anxiety about reaching a destination by a certain time. The journey itself holds as much importance as the arrival. The sheep need movement, the shepherd explains, seeming to read your thoughts, but they also need to feel secure in that movement. Too fast and they become anxious. Too slow and they begin to wander. The right pace creates both progress and peace. As you walk, you begin to notice how the sheep respond to the shepherd's voice. When he calls to one that has strayed too near a thorny thicket, it immediately adjusts its path. When he makes a particular clicking sound, the entire flock knows to pause and wait. When he sings a low melodic note, they gather more tightly together. "They know my voice," he says simply. "Not just its sound, but its meaning." The path begins to ascend a gentle hill. As you climb, you notice how the shepherd positions himself, sometimes ahead to lead the way, sometimes behind to encourage those who lag, sometimes at the side to prevent wandering toward unseen dangers. The greatest deception, he comments, is the belief that freedom means absence of guidance. True freedom comes from trusting the one who sees what you cannot see. From the top of the hill, you can see the landscape spread out in all directions. To the east, where you've come from, the sheepfold stands solid and familiar. To the west, your direction of travel, a wide valley opens up, green with the new grass and dotted with the blue of morning flowers. To the north and south, other hills rise, creating a natural corridor for your journey. The shepherd pauses here, allowing the sheep to rest for a moment and take in the wider view. He stands slightly apart, his eyes scanning the horizon with attentive care. You understand that he is looking for signs of danger, assessing weather patterns, planning the safest route forward. "Every step we take has been imagined before we take it," he says, again responding to your unspoken thoughts. "I walk these paths in my mind before I walk them with my feet. That is how I can lead with confidence even into new territories." As the journey resumes, you begin to notice the distinct personalities of the sheep around you. Some walk with the confidence of experience, staying close to the shepherd out of choice rather than fear. Others move with the uncertainty of youth, sometimes darting ahead, sometimes falling behind, requiring more of the shepherd's attention. One sheep in particular catches your notice and slightly smaller than the others, with a slight limp that suggests an old injury. This one stays especially close to the shepherd, often walking directly beside him on the opposite side from where you walk. "This one knows her need," the shepherd says, his voice warm with affection. "She learned through difficulty what some never learn through ease, that proximity to me is better than independence from me. The sun is higher now, warming the air and bringing out the sweet scent of the crushed grass beneath your feet. The path descends into the valley, where a small stream cuts through the field, creating a natural stopping place. The sheep move eagerly toward the water, their thirst evident in their quickened pace. The shepherd guides them to the calmest part of the stream, where the water flows gently and the banks slope gradually. Here the sheep can drink without danger, refreshing themselves in the clear water. You kneel beside the stream yourself, cupping your hands to bring the cool water to your lips. It tastes sweeter than any water you've known before, clean and life-giving. "Rest here a while," the shepherd says, settling himself on a smooth rock nearby. The journey continues, but never without restoration along the way. As you sit by the stream, watching the sheep drink and then begin to graze on the lush grass that grows along the banks, you feel a profound sense of being exactly where you are meant to be. There is no striving in this moment, no anxiety about what comes next, no regret about what came before. There is only the present reality of being on the path with the shepherd, moving at his pace, resting at his direction, continuing under his care. The soft sound of the stream, the gentle movements of the grazing sheep, the watchful presence of the shepherd, all combine to create a sense of security so deep that you feel your entire being relaxing into it. This is what it means to be truly led, truly guided, truly known. As the sun reaches its zenith, bathing the valley in golden light, you close your eyes for a moment, allowing the warmth to wash over you. In this perfect stillness, you hear the shepherd's voice once more, not speaking to the sheep now, but to you. The path continues beyond what you can see, but do not be anxious about what lies ahead. I have walked it already. I know every turn, every hill, every valley, and I will never lead you anywhere that I have not prepared for you. As the afternoon light begins to soften, casting longer shadows across the valley, you open your eyes to find the shepherd standing before you, his hand extended in invitation. "Come," he says simply. "There is something I want to show you before the day ends." You rise and follow him, noticing that the sheep have settled into a gentle rhythm of grazing. They seem content to remain in this lush valley for now, secure in the knowledge that the shepherd remains near. He leads you to a small rise overlooking the stream, where a single tree offers dappled shade. Its branches spread wide, creating a natural canopy that filters the sunlight into patterns of gold and shadow on the ground below. "Sit with me here," he says, settling himself against the trunk of the tree. As you join him in the shade, you realize you can see the entire flock from this vantage point. Every sheep is visible, from the confident leaders to the hesitant followers, from the strong to the vulnerable. The shepherd's gaze moves over them with attentive care, missing nothing. "Do you see how they graze without fear?" he asks. "They do not worry about predators or storms or scarcity. They have learned through experience that I provide what they need. I protect them from what would harm them. I guide them to places of abundance." You watch as the sheep move slowly through the grass, tapping to eat, occasionally looking up to confirm the shepherd's presence, then returning to their grazing with peaceful assurance. "This is the gift I offer," the shepherd continues, "not the absence of all danger, but the presence of constant care, not the elimination of all difficulty, but the assurance of never facing it alone. Particularly small lamb catches your attention. It must be one of the newest born to the flock. It stays close to its mother, occasionally frolicking in short bursts of energy before returning to her side. Its wool is especially white, almost luminous in the afternoon light. The youngest ones, the shepherd observes, following your gaze, sometimes need to be carried. When the path grows steep or the day grows long, I lift them into my arms and bear their weight. They learn trust through being held. You consider this, the image of the strong shepherd carrying the vulnerable lamb, not with impatience at its weakness, but with tenderness for its need. "Do you know," he asks, turning to look directly at you, "that I would leave the 99 to find the one? If a single sheep wanders away, becomes lost, falls into danger, I go after it, not because it is more valuable than the others, but because each one is irreplaceable to me. Each one is known by name. Each one matters uniquely." The depth of commitment in his voice moves you deeply. This is not the impersonal care of a distant guardian, but the passionate attention of one who loves specifically, individually, completely. The Good Shepherd, he continues, lays down his life for the sheep, not because the sheep have earned such sacrifice, but because the shepherd's love makes them worth any cost. As he speaks these words, the light shifts, taking on the golden quality of late afternoon. The air grows still, as if the world itself is listening to this truth. "Many voices will call to you," the shepherd says softly. "Some offering easier paths, some promising quicker rewards, some threatening what will happen if you don't follow them. But remember, my sheep know my voice. They recognize it among all others because they have spent time listening, because they have experienced its reliability, because they have found that following it always leads to life." He reaches out and places his hand on your shoulder, the weight of it both grounding and reassuring. "You are not alone in the fields of this world," he says. "Even when you cannot see me, I am watching. Even when you cannot hear me clearly, I am speaking. Even when you wander, I am seeking. This is the promise I make to each one who belongs to me. You will never be forgotten, never be abandoned, never be left without guidance." The sun is beginning its descent toward the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Soon it will be time to lead the sheep back to the safety of the fold for the night. "Trust and rest," the shepherd says, his voice a gentle command. "These are the twins of peace. Trust that I know the way forward. Rest in the knowledge that you are watched over. Together they create a quiet heart even in the midst of a noisy world." As these words settle into your spirit, you notice that your breathing has slowed to match the shepherd's. Deep, unhurried breaths that seem to draw peace directly from the air around you. Your body feels heavy with relaxation, as if every muscle has decided at once to release its tension. "The voice of love is always near," the shepherd murmurs, his words becoming almost musical in their rhythm. "Calling you by name, inviting you to follow, promising presence through every valley and on every mountain top." The sheep are beginning to gather more closely now, sensing the approaching evening. Their movements become slower, their grazing more intermittent. They are preparing for the journey back to the fold. Step by step, you are led to peace, the shepherd continues, his voice growing softer, not in great leaps or sudden flights, but in the patient unfolding of a path walked in trust. Each day has its portion of guidance, each moment carries its own light. He rises now, stretching his arms wide as if to embrace the entire flock at once. The setting sun behind him creates a halo effect, illuminating his outline with golden light. "It is time to return to the fold," he says, extending his hand to help you rise. "The day's journey concludes, but the care never ends. Through the night I watch, through the darkness I guard. When morning comes again, we continue the path together." As you stand, you feel a profound sense of renewal, as if the simple act of walking with the shepherd, listening to his voice, observing his care for the sheep has restored something essential within you. The worries that had weighed on your mind seem distant now, replaced by a calm certainty that you are known, you are valued, you are guided. The shepherd lifts his voice in a distinctive call that immediately draws the attention of every sheep. They respond with remarkable unity, moving toward him from all directions, gathering into a more cohesive group for the journey home. This is how it has always been, he explains as you begin to walk beside him, the flock following behind. The sheep scattered in feeding, gathered in travelling, diverse in their individual needs, united in their common trust, each one unique, yet part of a greater whole. The path back to the sheepfold seems somehow shorter than the journey out, as if the familiarity of returning home compresses distance itself. The evening light casts long shadows ahead of you, leading the way toward rest. "You're safe," the shepherd says, his voice now barely above a whisper. "You're loved. You're guided." These words repeat like a gentle refrain as you walk, matching the rhythm of your steps, synchronizing with your heartbeat. They are not just sounds but promises, not just comfort but truth. They sink deeply into your consciousness, creating a foundation of peace that feels both new and somehow always known. As the sheepfold comes into view, its stone walls glowing with the last light of day, you feel a sense of completion. Not the end of a glory, but the closing of a circle that will open again with the dawn. The shepherd leads the flock through the entrance, counting each one, greeting each by name, ensuring that all who went out have returned safely. When the last sheep has entered the fold, the shepherd takes his place at the gateway, his staff across his knees, his gaze moving between the gathered flock and the darkening landscape beyond. He is the living gate, the constant guardian, the embodiment of care that does not slumber or sleep. "Rest now," he says to you, his eyes holding yours with gentle intensity. The shepherd knows your name. The shepherd calls you to rest. The voice of love is always near. As night embraces the world once more, as stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, you feel yourself surrounded by perfect peace, held in the care of the one who calls you by name, who leads you beside still waters, who restores your soul. In this sanctuary of trust, sleep comes not as escape but as gift, not as absence but as presence in the watchful love of the Good Shepherd. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful journey with the Good Shepherd. If these words have brought you comfort tonight, please consider subscribing to Sacred Rest for more scripture-inspired sleep stories. And I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. May you rest deeply in the knowledge that you are watched over with perfect care through this night and always. Hello, dear friend. Welcome to Sacred Rest. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight for this time of peaceful reflection and spiritual rest. Wherever you are in the world right now, I hope this finds you settling into a comfortable space. How was your day? Was it filled with joy and laughter, or perhaps challenges that left you weary. Whatever experiences you've carried through your hours, know that this is a safe place to set them down. What time is it where you are? Perhaps it's the deep of night, when the world has grown quiet and stars pepper the sky. Maybe it's early evening, and you're seeking a moment of calm before sleep. Or perhaps you're listening in the gentle light of dawn. Wherever you're from in our vast, beautiful world, whether you're nestled in a busy city or somewhere quiet and remote, I welcome you to this sacred time. If you found comfort in these meditations, I'd be deeply grateful if you would subscribe to Sacred Rest. Your subscription helps this ministry continue providing peaceful, scripture-based sleep meditations to those who need them most. When we gather together in this digital sanctuary, we create a community of believers finding rest in God's presence. Now I invite you to settle more deeply into your bed or chair. Feel the weight of your body being supported. Notice where you might be holding tension, perhaps in your shoulders, your jaw, or your hands, and gently release it with each breath. Breathe in God's peace and exhale any lingering worries. Tonight, we'll journey across the Sea of Galilee with Jesus and his disciples. We'll witness how even the fiercest storms must bow to his gentle command. In your own life, whatever storms you face, anxiety, uncertainty, fear, or overwhelm, this story reminds us of a profound truth. The one who calms the seas can calm our hearts as well. Let's begin with a prayer. Loving Father, as we prepare for rest, we invite your peace to wash over us. Still our racing thoughts and calm our beating hearts. As we journey through this story of your Son's power over the storm, help us to trust you with the storms in our own lives. May this time be a sanctuary of rest and renewal. In Jesus' name, Amen. The day had been long, wonderfully full but exhausting. Jesus had been teaching since morning, sharing parables about seeds and lamps and the mysterious growth of God's kingdom. Crowds had pressed in around him, their faces eager and questioning, their needs endless. As the golden light of late afternoon stretched across the hillside surrounding the Sea of Galilee, Jesus looked out at the water, its surface catching the amber glow of the setting sun. "Let us go across to the other side," he said simply to his disciples. The men nodded, familiar with their rabbi's ways by now. When the crowds grew too large, when the demands became too constant, Jesus would often seek the quiet of the water or the solitude of the hills. They understood his need for moments of peace. The disciples began preparing a fishing boat, one they had used many times before. It wasn't large, but it was sturdy enough for the journey across the lake. Several of them were fishermen after all. Peter, Andrew, James, and John knew these waters intimately. They had spent countless nights on this very sea, reading its moods, respecting its power, harvesting its bounty. As the last remnants of the crowd dispersed, moving back toward the villages dotting the shoreline, the disciples helped Jesus into the boat. They couldn't help but notice the weariness in his movements, the heaviness in his shoulders. He had given so much of himself that day, healing the sick, answering questions, teaching with stories that somehow made the mysteries of heaven feel tangible and close. There were other boats setting out with them, smaller vessels carrying more followers who weren't ready to end their time with the teacher. The little flotilla pushed away from shore, wooden hulls creaking gently as they slipped into deeper water. Oars dipped rhythmically, creating small whirlpools that glinted copper in the fading light. In the stern of the boat, Jesus found a cushion, a simple thing made of cloth and stuffed with wool. Without ceremony, he laid his head upon it. The gentle rocking motion of the boat, the soft splashing of water against the hull, and the quiet murmuring of his friends' voices created a lullaby that his exhausted body could not resist. Within moments, Jesus was asleep, his breathing deep and even. The disciples continued their work, some rowing, others adjusting the small sail to catch what little breeze stirred across the water. They talked quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing back at their sleeping teacher with affection and protectiveness. "He pushed himself too hard again today," Peter whispered to John. "Did you see how many people he healed?" Matthew added. "And yet he had time to explain his parables to us afterward." "I'm still thinking about the mustard seed," Thomas said thoughtfully. "How something so small can become something so significant." As they conversed, the brilliance of sunset gave way to the soft indigo of early evening. Stars began to appear, first one, then dozens, then hundreds, until the heavens above them shimmered with light. The moon, nearly full, cast a silver pathway across the water. Under different circumstances it would have been a perfect night for sailing. But the Sea of Galilee, nestled as it was in a basin surrounded by hills and mountains, was known for its sudden, violent storms. Cool air from the Mediterranean could rush down the mountain passes and collide with the warm air over the lake, creating tempests that arose with frightening speed. And on this night, as Jesus slept, the first signs of change began to appear. It started subtly, a freshening of the breeze that made the sail suddenly grow taut. The disciples, who were fishermen, exchanged knowing glances. They had felt this shift before. "Perhaps we should wake him," Andrew suggested, looking back at Jesus. "No," Peter replied. "Let him rest. We can handle a bit of wind." But the breeze continued to strengthen, becoming a wind, and then a gale. The surface of the water, which had been as smooth as polished glass, began to roughen. Small wavelets appeared, growing quickly into swells. The boat, which had been gliding peacefully, now began to pitch and roll. The other boats that had been following them were already turning back toward the shore they had left, their occupants clearly visible in the moonlight, faces turned upward at the darkening sky. But Jesus' boat was now nearly in the middle of the lake, equally distant from both shores. Turning back would be as dangerous as continuing forward. Within minutes the wind was howling through the rigging. The sail had to be quickly furled before it could tear or, worse, overturn the vessel. The disciples moved with the practiced efficiency of men who had faced such conditions before, but even they could not hide their growing concern. The sky, which had been clear and star-filled just moments before, was now obscured by fast-moving clouds that seemed to boil out of nowhere. The moon disappeared behind them, plunging the lake into shadowy darkness, broken only by the white foam of wave caps. Now the boat was being tossed violently. Waves crashed over the bow, sending frigid water cascading into the hull. Several of the men scrambled to bail with whatever containers they could find, while others struggled with the oars, trying to keep the vessel from being broadside to the swells. "This is getting dangerous," James shouted over the roar of the wind. "I've never seen it come up so quickly," his brother John replied, his face glistening with spray. The storm continued to intensify. Lightning now split the darkness, illuminating the scene in stark, terrifying detail. Waves as tall as a man's height, disciples with fear etched across their faces, and still somehow Jesus remained asleep in the stern. Water was coming in faster than they could bail it out. The boat was riding lower in the water, each wave bringing them closer to the point where they would be swamped entirely. Even Peter, who had weathered countless storms on this lake, felt a cold fear gripping his heart. They were in real danger now. The disciples looked at one another, their expressions reflecting a dawning realization. For all their experience, for all their skill, this storm might be beyond their ability to survive. Death felt suddenly uncomfortably close, a cold presence riding the winds that screamed around them. "Where is your faith in these moments?" a quiet voice might have asked, had anyone been listening. But the disciples could hear only the howling wind, the crashing waves, and the hammering of their own frightened hearts. And still, Jesus slept. It was Philip who finally broke. "We need to wake him," he shouted, gesturing wildly toward the stern. The others nodded in agreement, though none could have articulated exactly what they expected Jesus to do. He was no sailor. He had spent his life as a carpenter, not a fisherman. And yet, in their moment of greatest fear, they turned to him instinctively. Peter struggled toward the stern, fighting to keep his balance as the boat heaved beneath him. He reached Jesus and knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Even in the midst of chaos, Peter couldn't help but marvel. How could anyone sleep through such violence? "Master!" Peter called, having to shout to be heard over the storm. "Master, wake up!" Jesus stirred slightly but did not wake. The boat pitched violently, nearly throwing Peter off his feet. He gripped Jesus' robe more firmly. "Teacher," this time it was John who'd made his way to join Peter, "don't you care if we drown?" Those words, spoken from fear rather than faith, seemed to penetrate Jesus' sleep. His eyes opened, taking in the scene around him with calm clarity. The water sloshing in the bottom of the boat, the sail straining against its ties, his friends' faces contorted with fear. There was no disorientation, no moment of confusion or alarm. Jesus simply sat up, his movements unhurried even as the boat threatened to capsize beneath him. Water streamed from his hair and beard. His robe was soaked through. Yet he showed no sign of the terror that had overcome his disciples. What happened next would be burned into the memory of every man present. A moment they would recount countless times in the years to come, a demonstration of power so profound that it would forever alter their understanding of the one they followed. Jesus stood up, in a boat being violently tossed by waves. When standing was nearly impossible, Jesus rose to his feet with perfect balance, as though the deck beneath him were solid ground. He looked out at the churning waters, at the dark sky split by lightning, at the wind that howled like a living thing. And then he spoke. Just 3 words, uttered not in a shout to be heard over the storm, but in a tone of quiet authority, as one who expected to be obeyed. "Peace, be still." The Greek words, siopa pephimoso, carried a weight beyond their literal meaning. Silence. Be muzzled, as though addressing not unthinking elements, but a creature that could hear and must obey. What happened next defied all natural law, all human experience. The wind ceased. Not gradually, not with diminishing gusts that slowly faded away. It simply stopped, as completely as if a door had been closed against it. One moment it howled with deadly force, the next it was gone, and the waves, which should have continued to roll and crash even after the wind died, also subsided immediately. The surface of the lake, which moments before had been a chaotic, foam-streaked nightmare, became as smooth as polished marble. So complete was the transformation that the stars, once again visible in the cleared sky, reflected perfectly in the water's surface, as though the disciples floated in the midst of infinite space. The silence that followed was profound, almost shocking in its completeness. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of small wavelets against the hull and the ragged breathing of the disciples. For a long moment no one spoke. They stared at Jesus, then at the suddenly calm water, then back at Jesus. Their minds struggled to process what they had just witnessed. This was beyond their categories, beyond their understanding of what was possible. It was Jesus who finally broke the silence, his voice gentle yet penetrating in the stillness. He looked at each of his disciples in turn, his gaze both loving and challenging. "Why are you so afraid?" he asked. "Do you still have no faith?" The questions hung in the air, not accusatory but probing, inviting self-examination. Faith. Such a small word for such a profound concept. They had believed in him enough to follow him, to leave their livelihoods behind. They had seen him heal the sick, cast out demons, challenge the religious authorities. They had committed their lives to his cause. But this kind of faith, faith that remained steady when death seemed certain, faith that trusted even when all evidence suggested they were doomed, this was another level entirely. This was faith that could sleep through a storm. The disciples did not answer Jesus' questions. Instead, they posed their own, speaking in hushed, awestruck tones among themselves. "Who is this?" they whispered. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." It was the question that would echo through their hearts for days, weeks, years to come. Who is this man we have chosen to follow? If the forces of nature bend to his will, what might that mean? The implications were staggering, too vast to fully comprehend in that moment of stunned amazement. The boat continued to drift peacefully on the now placid surface of the lake. Above them, the night sky had cleared entirely, revealing a canopy of stars so brilliant they seemed close enough to touch. The moon cast its silver light once more, creating a path of a shimmering brightness that stretched toward the eastern shore. Jesus did not press them for answers to his questions. He simply sat back down in the stern, his expression serene. Perhaps he understood that the seed had been planted, a seed of deeper understanding that would take time to germinate and grow. The disciples returned to their positions, taking up oars once more to continue the journey to the other side. But they rowed differently now, their movements careful and reverent, as though the very air around them had become sacred space. Occasionally they would glance at Jesus, then at one another, communicating without words their shared astonishment. As they approached the eastern shore, the first light of dawn began to paint the sky with gentle hues of pink and gold. A new day was beginning, and for the disciples, it would be a day coloured by the extraordinary revelation of the night. They had embarked on this journey as followers of a remarkable teacher. They would disembark with the dawning realization that they were in the presence of someone far greater than they had imagined. The boat's hull scraped gently against the shore. One by one, the disciples stepped out, their feet sinking into the wet sand. Jesus was the last to disembark, moving with the same quiet grace that characterized all his actions. As his foot touched the shore, he paused for a moment, gazing back across the now peaceful waters. Perhaps he was thinking of the lesson his friends had just learned, or perhaps of the greater storms, the deeper challenges that still awaited them all. For this night's tempest, however terrifying, was but a small preview of the forces that would one day rage against him and those who loved him. But those were concerns for another day. For now, Jesus simply turned toward the rising sun and began walking inland, knowing his disciples would follow, and they did, their footsteps in the sand forming a pattern behind his, a visual representation of the faith journey they had embarked upon, still uncertain, but now enriched by a deeper glimpse of the one they followed, the one who could speak to storms and be obeyed. As we rest in the stillness of this moment, let's reflect on what we've just witnessed through the eyes of the disciples. Feel the residual awe that must have lingered in their hearts as they processed what had happened on that lake. The one they thought they knew had revealed himself to be far more powerful, far more majestic than they had imagined. Perhaps you find yourself in a storm right now, not one of wind and waves, but a storm nonetheless. It might be anxiety that crashes over you like relentless waves. It might be uncertainty about the future, rising like dark clouds on the horizon. It might be grief or loneliness or fear, emotions that howl through your heart like a gale-force wind. Take a moment to name your storm silently. What is causing turbulence in your life right now? What makes your heart race with worry or your mind churn with doubt? Pause. Now imagine Jesus in your boat. Yes, right there with you in the midst of your personal tempest. This is not wishful thinking or mere metaphor. It is the profound reality of the Christian faith. Emmanuel, God with us, not God observing from a safe distance, not God waiting for us on the shore after we've weathered the storm alone, but God present in the very midst of our chaos. And here is something remarkable to consider. In the story we've just heard, Jesus didn't calm the storm immediately. First, he slept through it. There's a profound lesson here that's easy to miss. Sometimes the greatest demonstration of faith is not receiving an immediate solution to our problem, but finding peace in the midst of it. Peace so profound it can rest, even when everything around it is in chaos. Jesus sleeping in the storm wasn't indifference. It was a demonstration of absolute trust in the Father. It was a live sermon more powerful than any words he could have spoken. You can rest even when the storms rage, because you know who holds you. Take a deep breath and sit with that thought for a moment. Pause. Now consider the words Jesus spoke to the disciples. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? These weren't words of condemnation, but an invitation to growth. Jesus was gently showing them the gap between what they professed to believe about him and how they behaved when circumstances became frightening. He was calling them to a faith that remains steady even when situations suggest there's reason to panic. What might Jesus be inviting you to trust him with right now? Where in your life might he be saying, "Peace, be still"? Pause. There's another beautiful detail in this story that's worth lingering over. Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Not let us go into the middle of the lake and drown. He had already declared the destination before the journey began. Despite the storm that arose, his intention remained unchanged. They were going to reach the other side. In your own life, what other side has Jesus promised you? What word has he spoken over your situation that the current storm seems to contradict? Hold fast to his promise. The storm, no matter how violent, cannot prevent the fulfillment of his declared purpose. When Jesus commands something, whether it's peace, be still, to a raging sea, or let us go to the other side to his disciples, it will come to pass. His word does not return void. It accomplishes what he intends. There's a particular comfort in knowing that the same voice that commanded the elements has spoken over your life. The same authority that subdued the storm is engaged with your circumstances. The same love that prompted Jesus to stand and act on behalf of his frightened friends is extended to you as you navigate your own waters. Listen now for his voice in the quiet of your heart. Perhaps he's not removing your storm immediately. Perhaps, like the disciples, you're being invited to know him more deeply through the experience of watching him work in unexpected ways. But know this, he is in your boat. And because of that, you will reach the shore. Let the gentle rocking of the now calm waters lull you toward rest. Feel the tension leave your body as you entrust yourself to the one who commands the wind and waves. Whatever storms tomorrow may bring, tonight you rest in the presence of the storm calmer, the peace speaker, the Lord of wind and wave. Let these words wash over you like gentle waves. Peace, be still. You are safe in his hands. Let go of your worries. Let him hold them now. Peace, be still. Rest in this truth. If the winds and waves obey him, so can your anxious heart. You don't have to control the storm. You just have to rest with the one who can. As we come to the close of our time together, I want to offer a blessing over you as you prepare for sleep. May you rest tonight in the perfect peace that comes from knowing the master of the storm is watching over you. May you sleep deeply, secure in the knowledge that the same God who calmed the Sea of Galilee is present in your room, attentive to your breathing, mindful of your needs. May your dreams be serene, unthreatened by the storms of waking life. May the gentle rocking of God's love lull you into profound rest, the kind of rest that renews not just the body but the soul. May you awaken tomorrow with the disciples' question still echoing in your heart. Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. And may that wonder lead you into a day lived with greater trust and deeper peace. Let us pray. Loving Father, I thank you for the precious soul listening right now. You know their name, their face, their struggles, and their joys. You know the storms they've weathered, and the ones that may still lie ahead. I ask that you would spread your mantle of peace over them tonight. Quiet their racing thoughts, slow their breathing, release the tension from their muscles, guard their mind against anxious ruminations, and fill it instead with the truth of your loving presence. Lord Jesus, just as you stood in authority over the storm on Galilee, I ask you to speak peace, be still over any turbulence in their life. Calm the waters of their circumstances. Quiet the winds of their worry. Help them to rest in the boat with you, trusting that you will bring them safely to the other side. Holy Spirit, be the breath of God in this room tonight. Fill this space with your comforting presence. Minister to the deep places of hurt or fear that conscious thought cannot reach. Repair, restore and renew as only you can do during the sacred hours of sleep. We rest tonight in the perfect love that casts out fear, in the mighty name of Jesus who calms all storms. Amen. Remember, dear friend, Jesus is in your boat. The journey continues tomorrow, but tonight you can sleep in perfect peace. You're watched over. You are loved. You're not alone. Good night, and may God bless your rest.